Hey guys, welcome to the 1974 Triumph TR6 that we are fire restoring, and the car is finally back in one piece. You know that we did a lot of work on it already, but I'm just gonna recap it here for people who are falling right into this video, so they might want to go back and watch the previous episodes because they might find them interesting. So the car was on fire basically, and the owner decided to get rid of it, so we obtained it with the fire damage, and we went ahead and we kind of got rid of everything that was burnt under the dash, and we cleaned it up and we painted it. We also took care of the engine bay, which was not because of the fire, but I guess somebody painted the engine bay over some rubberized thing that somebody previously sprayed there, and it was in a really bad shape. So took me a week, but cleaned up the entire engine bay and I painted it. We also took the frame from under the car out and we replaced the trailing arm supports, which are a very weak spot on TR6. So all that was done, and with Chef Tash we managed to put back the body on the frame, and he helped me tremendously here by assembling the rear end while I serviced and partially rebuilt the differential, and then I put the diff on the car, and we still have a little bit more work to do underneath before I focus a little bit on the engine bay, because we took apart the carburetors there, alternator and stuff like that. We want to put these back as well so we can make the car drivable without the interior, but at least I want to be able to sit even on the floor and drive the car out if I needed the hoist, because now my hoist has been taken here for 2 weeks and I need it. I need it for real projects, because this is a fun project, but I have paying projects that are waiting, so I need to do that. So without further ado, let's get crack-a-lacking. So what we need to do underneath is we need to run new brake lines, fuel lines, and attach the exhaust. However, there's one more thing that I'm forgetting. The e-brake cables, first of all, they look nasty. The e-brake was working before, but they look nasty, and also I managed to snap this stud that holds this metal block to the trailing arm. I remember I repaired one of these before. I drilled a hole and I tapped it and I put a stud there. And I was gonna do that here too, because I had no other option. But as I was digging into the basement to find parts in between all the parts that people donated, I also found brand new, or relatively new, e-brake cables. So we're gonna change those. I took out the old ones already. I should have done that before I installed the diff, but still we can do that now. So that's why I'm here inside working in the interior, because I want to change this before I continue underneath the car, because it's going to be easier to do it now. What's interesting here is that we have these two holes for the cables, but the cable for the rear left goes through the right hole, and the cable from the rear right goes through the left hole. I think that helps with the curvature somehow underneath. So I'm gonna go underneath and I'm gonna try to fish them through here. Okay, and then how this works is we put it inside here, like that. Oh! Why can't I do it? Okay. Now I can put this back and screw it down. And the other end comes here to the wheel, and this stud that I just mentioned bolts through the trailing arm right here, like that, and this hooks up to the lever here. But I'm not gonna do that yet, because I want to replace this brake line here, and it can be done with the brake cable in place, but it's going to be much easier to do it without the brake cable in place. So speaking of brake lines, let's actually start doing that. And here are the old brake lines under the car, the way they came out of it. And I kept them for, first of all, for the fittings, because we're gonna reuse the fittings, and second for shape, because we're gonna use them as templates. So this is the entire rear system. This is where it goes to the PDWA, and then it goes down. There's a connection somewhere in the middle of the frame. Then the long line comes into this three-way splitter, which we're gonna take out now and we're gonna clean. And then flexible hose, we have a new one, just like for the other side, and these are also donation. Many or most of the parts that I'm using on this car are all donated to me, so that's great. And from the flex line, this is the short line that I just showed you on the trailing arm, from the flex line here to the wheel cylinder. And on the other side, on top of the actually three-way splitter, we have this line that goes above the diff and above the drive shaft, and then again before the trailing arm it goes into a flexible line and another short line to the wheel cylinder there. So one by one we're going to replace them with copper nickel ones. I also have the two fuel lines. One is a fuel line, one is a vapor line that returns the vapors back to the gas tank. So we're going to replace these as well with copper nickel ones, and the e-brake lines we already replaced. So let's start with this contraption here, which I already took apart and cleaned up. So this is the three-way splitter with the bolt that holds it to the frame, and this line that I removed from here and we're going to replace. But you see this line goes on the top of the three-way splitter. So the three-way splitter is ready. We just need to make new hard line, right? And you can see here it has two fittings. I already cleaned them. It has a male and it has a female. Here I cut the flare already and I took this out to clean it. But you see they are the same. They are male and a female, right? Same threads. Now we're gonna reuse the fittings because it's hard to find those apparently. I have an entire chart that I made, and you can download it from my website. I'll put a link here which tells you what fittings we have on each and every line on a TR6. It tells you also the length of the line, what fitting you have there, and what flare. We're going to talk about flares a little bit later. First, let's talk about the fittings. These, the females, I'm usually able to recycle. They don't get damaged, they're just nuts, so once you wire wheel them, they become ready to use again. The problem is with these, with the males, very often when you try to undo them, if they're super tight, you round the hex here and then they're useless. So sometimes I need to get new ones, and they are apparently, again, hard to find because of this non-threaded lead here in the end. The threads are easy to find, so in fact I was able to find replacement on Amazon, but the problem with them is that they don't have the non-threaded lead in the front, and they also here, instead of 7/16 wrench, they go with 3/8. So that's fine. Now if you ask me, there's absolutely no problem with the non-threaded lead. I believe the non-threaded lead is there just so you can kind of put this into the hole and then start the threads, because many times it is hard to start these threads just because you have a line in the back that is on an angle and you have to bend the line in order to start the threads. So I'm pretty sure that the non-threaded lead is for that reason, so it helps you to start the threads. So if you have threads all the way, I don't think that's a problem. I've tried before and it worked. I also did it multiple times already. I put this on my lathe and I removed the threads from the first 3/16 length here, but I don't think it's needed because it's not the threads that seal, it is the flare that seals, right? This gets pushed into a negative flare that you can see down there, negative to that. And the nut just tightens and pushes this flare into that other one, and the seal happens right here. That's it. There's nothing here where the threads are. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to reuse all the fittings that were there, but if I strip or if I round the heads on one of these male fittings, I'm gonna use a new one without removing the threads. Again, it's my car, I can do whatever I want. Anyway, so let me cut also this and remove the fitting from here, and then we're gonna bend new line out of copper nickel 3/16 line. Now for flaring, we're gonna use this flaring tool, which is fantastic. I'm telling you, this is the best investment probably I've ever made. And let's talk about the actual flares now. In Triumphs, there are two flares that we use, a bubble flare and double flare. And this is something that people get confused with. So that's why I'm gonna show you here on piece of copper line actually, because I can't use that. This was shipped to me as a scam. I ordered copper nickel and they shipped this to me long time ago. So anyways, just for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna make one double and one bubble flare here, just so I can show you how everything works. On this tool, there are three operations that you have to do when you're doing flares. We use operation 0 and operation 1 for bubble flare. For double flare, we have one extra operation, which is operation 2, and turns the bubble flare into a double flare. But let me show you first. So operation 0 is basically a flat die here that lines up your line with this block. There are different blocks here for different sizes, for different flares. For our bubble and our double flares, we use this block. I'm not gonna go into too many details about these two. So now we just have this snug very loosely. The line is still able to move inside. So with this flat one, we're gonna push it so it lines up with the face of the block. Now we can tighten it so it doesn't move anymore. We can turn this to operation 1 for 3/16 line. And when we do this, we push all the way and our bubble flare is done. We did operation 0 and operation 1. So now we can undo the line, and you can see here we have a bubble. That's all. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about that later. First, let's make a double flare. So for double flare, we start with operation 0 again. We put our block here. Again, we snug it very gently. Align everything with operation 0. Now we tighten everything. And we go to operation 1 again. So now basically we have a bubble there, but we want to turn it into a double. And now we go to operation 2 for 3/16 line. And operation 2 turns the bubble flare into a double. And just like that, we are done. So you see, that used to be a bubble, and now with the second 2 there, we made it into a double. Now I'm gonna cut them off from this line. Voila, here we have a double flare and a bubble flare. This is bubble, this is double. So how they work is they are negative to each other. A bubble always mates with a double and they seal. If we put a fitting here, usually not always, but in 99% of the cases in TR6, the bubble goes with a male fitting and the double goes with a female. And now if you tighten these together, the two fittings compress the two flares inside towards each other and make the seal. Usually you don't you don't connect two lines to each other. You usually connect a line to a master cylinder or to a slave cylinder or to a splitter, let's say, or something like that. Well, what happens is here we have a bubble, and inside there, like I already explained, we have a double. We have exactly this shape inside there. That's why we need a bubble, so it can go and mate with this double flare that is inside, and then the fitting comes on top and compresses the bubble towards that double flare shape that we have inside. And that's all. But like I said, not always. On TR6 specifically, always when you have a bubble flare, you have a male fitting. But not always when you have a double flare, you have a female. The only place where you have a double flare with a male fitting is on the rear wheel cylinders. The rear wheel cylinders, if you look inside, you're gonna see a bubble sticking up instead of double. Oh my god, so many bubbles and so many doubles, I'm getting confused now. But anyway, so that's the magic behind the flares. You always have a bubble that mates with a double. Whether the bubble is on the line and the double is on the fitting or the other way around, you always have a double that mates with a bubble. So that's it. In this case, now let's make this. I know that for this line we had the double right here, and we had the female fitting, and we had a bubble here. Oops, that's my double. And we had a bubble here that was with a male fitting. So at the end of the line, let's make a double first, and we're gonna put the fitting. We still don't have a fitting on the other side, but it's always a good idea to put your fitting so you don't forget. So again, we are making a double. Operation 0. Operation, oops. Now we have to tighten it. Operation 1. Operation 2. And that's it. And we have our double. So now we're gonna start bending the line the same way. And I know that from here I just cut the end, very short piece of the end. So we're gonna try to make it the same here. The good thing about the copper nickel lines is that they're super soft. You can bend them with your fingers and without any kinks. It is super nice. Okay, now we're gonna follow this line. Okay, something like this. It doesn't need to be super exact. Now let's cut it here. Not gonna forget the fitting. Put the fitting on, and this time we're gonna have to make a bubble. So only operation 1, right? No operation 2. So operation 1. So here's our bubble, and now this goes on top of this fitting and mates with the double inside. That's it, and this line is now ready. Oh, and here we have this clip that holds it, but I don't remember if it is this way or this way. So we're gonna do it in the car. Alright, so this is where the three-way splitter goes, and the bubble flare with the male fitting that we bolted on top goes above the diff and comes here on the other side. And somewhere up there is that clip that I'm gonna clip it up there to the frame once we do this here. So what is this? This is the flexible line that is bolted to the frame as well on that side, right there. And as you can see, it has a bubble at the end, right? And here we have a double with the female fitting. So you see how this double matches the bubble on the flexible line, and then with the female fitting, female nut here, we can compress them together. I'm gonna tighten this with 9/16, and then I'm gonna go and put that clip up there to make sure that it holds the line away from the drive shaft. On this side, that's the only place where we have a copper washer instead of a flare. So we have a copper washer that goes at the end of this line here. This line is flat, so the seal here happens through the copper washer against the surface here of the three-way splitter. Okay, so this is tight now. The clip is clipping up there, and this here is tight. So now we have the two flexible lines on both sides that mount into this ear here of the trailing arm. Basically that's how it goes, and then from here again you see we have a bubble at the end, so we need to have a female fitting with a double flare, which is this line. You see we have the double with a female fitting, and this is where I said this is the only exception where we have a male fitting, which you see it's pretty rounded, so we're gonna have to replace this one, but we have a male fitting with a double flare. It goes into the wheel cylinder, which has a bubble inside for some reason. Okay, so this line is now installed, and you see how it goes under the e-brake cable here, then the little clip down there right here, and then into the flexible line, which goes into the three-way splitter. Same thing on the other side, and then from this port we made the long line, which is bubble flare with a male fitting going into the union here, double flare with female, double flare with female. The union has a bubble on each side, and then this line goes up, and for now it's hanging in the air up there, but it is gonna go into the PDWA. Then for the front lines we have a three-way splitter right here, which is gonna be fed on this side again from the PDWA. There's a line going up. This is the left line here, and it is a bubble flare with male fitting going up here and then coming down on this side, and double flare with the female fitting going into the flexible line, and the flexible line goes here into this piece. And now here there's a very short line which I wanted to show you because it's important. It is basically the same thing, bubble flare with male fitting, double flare with female fitting, but as you can see here, the male fitting is shorter and it is actually metric thread. I believe that's 10mm thread. For the early TR6s, this fitting was the regular 3/8 fitting that we use everywhere around the car, but I think after 74 they switched to metric calipers, so only this fitting changed, and now it is metric. So it goes right here. Where is the thing? I'm trying to do it with one hand, but basically the male goes into the caliper and the female goes into the flexible line and bolts like that. That's what it looks like. So I'm gonna tighten this, and this side is gonna be ready. By the way, I noticed this, yes, more work for me. And even here the rubber on the ball joint is all torn, so even more work for me now. Anyway, so for the right side, for the right wheel, we have this long line that I already made. Again, male with a bubble, with a female with a double on the other side with this special shape. Okay, so this is the line for the right side. It comes out of the front end of the three-way splitter, goes under into these clips that are broken, but when we have the fuel line here, the vapor line, which I took out to clean, then they can be clipped together, and then the brake line goes up and over and into the flexible line, and from the flexible line, just like on the other side, it goes into the caliper here. All right, and that completes the underside of the car. The rear brakes are complete, and the end of this line is just sticking into the engine bay, and the front brakes are completed all the way to the three-way splitter. But now from the three-way splitter we have to go up again into the engine bay for the PDWA, and that is this line. So that's the old one. We're gonna make a new one, but I just wanted to show you that here at the bottom it has a regular 3/8 fitting male with a bubble, but at the top it has a 7/16 fitting. It still has 3/16 hole inside for the line, but the threads are bigger. It's 7/16, and again it has the bubble. So I'm just gonna put it on temporarily so we can go in the engine bay, and I'll show you why that fitting is bigger. So this is where the two lines come. This is from the front brakes with the bigger fitting, and this is the rear line with the smaller fitting. Here we have the PDWA, which we're gonna talk about it a little bit more, but not now. And that's how the PDWA comes, and that's how the two lines go into it. And as you can see here, the threaded hole for the front lines is bigger than the threaded hole for the rear lines. And the PDWA can be a little bit intimidating assembly for some people, but it is actually a very simple thing. It's basically two separate lines. They don't have direct contact with each other. Just a tube that the front brakes go through and another tube that the rear brakes go through. So, like we said, the front ones here have a bigger fitting. Also on the other side, the fitting is bigger, and also at the top, the fitting is bigger. This is where the two fittings go into the master cylinder. That's how they cross. The front one crosses and goes to the back of the master cylinder here. And the rear brakes crisscross here and go to the front end of the master cylinder, because that's how it is set up. But here on the master cylinder again, we have a bigger threaded hole for the front brakes and smaller for the rear brakes. So I'm guessing they made it this way just so it is idiot proof, so somebody doesn't plug in the rear brakes into the front ones, etc. So you can't confuse them. Once you put the fittings the right way, you can't mess them up. There's only one way to install them. So here, here, and here are the only three fittings that are 7/16 instead of 3/8 on both sides of the PDWA for the front brakes and on the master cylinder for the front brakes. So for those who are curious, what the PDWA does is right here between the rear and the front brakes, there's a plunger that's right in the middle. And this plunger right in the center has a notch where the end of this switch, this is electrical switch, so the tip of this electrical switch falls into this notch and the switch is normally open. But let's say if you have a brake failure in one of the two lines, let's say the rear lines fail, you have a leak, and now when you press the pedal, there's no pressure on this side. What happens is the pressure from the front brakes, when you push the pedal, pushes this plunger towards the rear ones because there's no pressure here, and as the plunger moves, pushes the switch up and it connects it to ground. That's all it does, it connects it to ground. This switch has two prongs here. I have no idea why. Many people were asking me how come I only have one wire but I have two prongs here. Well, that's because the two prongs are bridged inside, literally. If you clean it and look inside, there's a little wire connecting the two prongs, so they act as one. And what happens is when the plunger pushes it up, it just connects this prong to ground from the actual PDWA. It doesn't connect the two prongs together, they are connected together already. So that's what it does. If your front brakes fail, then the pressure from the rear ones pushes the plunger this way, and it does the same thing. And if that happens, you fix your brakes, then you have to recenter the plunger so it doesn't give you a light on the dash anymore. So what we're gonna do when we're bleeding the brakes, because we're gonna start with the rear brakes, and when we're bleeding the rear ones, we're gonna create pressure on this side, but the front ones are still not gonna be bled. So if we push on the pedal, it's possible that we're gonna shift the plunger while we're bleeding the brakes. So we don't want that to happen. So for that, I actually made a centering tool for this. So we're gonna take out the switch, we're gonna put the centering tool so it keeps the plunger centered even when the pressure is different in the two compartments. And then when we bleed the front ones as well, and we have pressure on both sides now, then I'm gonna remove the centering tool and we're gonna put back the switch. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go now and remake this line, and I'm gonna make these two, and then we're gonna assemble everything and we can come back and bleed the brakes. Okay, it's all hooked up. The rear brakes with the 3/8 fittings go into the rear of the PDWA, then they crisscross here with the two lines and they come to the front side of the master cylinder. Then the front brakes, you see from the three-way splitter, this line down there has the 3/8 fitting, then it comes here and it has the 7/16 fitting, and then another 7/16 again crisscrosses and comes to the rear of the master cylinder again with the 7/16 fitting. So 1, 2, 3, these fittings are 7/16, everything else is 3/8. As you can see here, I removed the switch, and instead of the switch now, I'm gonna put in place my centering tool, which is actually, it's not a centering tool. The plunger needs to be centered, and then you put this to keep it centered. It won't center it if it's not centered. So we're gonna keep this off for now, and we're gonna put the tool there, like this. And now we are ready to bleed the brakes, except I just realized that I don't have brake fluid. So I have to go to the store, but it's not gonna happen today. So I'm just gonna put the car up and I'm gonna continue working on the fuel lines, and I'm gonna get brake fluid in the morning.